I remember the place, and even the poorest folks had long abandoned it for better shelter. Finally, an agreement was reached. The rent would be $1 per month, but no drinking. They said their names were
Zeke. Ralph.
and that they were brothers.
Uh-huh. Yep.
They had no trade, hired out to do anything that needed to be done.
We dig graves, ditches, whatever.
I guess we're the Shovel Brothers.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
You could tell something was different about them. They had too much class for ditch diggers, but not enough drive and determination to do much else. They spoke good English, at least better than some of the folks who hired them. It was assumed they had come from a family with some means who had long ago given up on trying to make anything out of them.
If you have never used a shovel, there's a talent to doing it correctly. You don't have to be strong, but the timing is all important. First, you have to thrust the shovel with your arm and shoulder at just the right angle to the earth. You then must follow that up with a push of your leg and foot on top of the shovel. You have to let your tool work for you.
One thing noticeable about them was that Zeke was right-handed and left-footed, and Ralph was left-handed and right-footed. This allowed them to dig side by side and not interfere with each other's motions. Man, they can dig some dirt.
We never caused any problems, never stole, lived up to the rental agreement by not drinking. We did not curse.
And we were always respectful of the ladies, regardless of their age.
They were different, however. As with all people who are different, people began to gossip about them. Some said they were not brothers at all, but homosexual lovers. Others said that they must have had criminal backgrounds. But the only factual fault that anyone could point to was that they wouldn't go to church. Any church.
The Methodists tried.
The Baptists tried.
Even the Pentecostals took a shot at them. But none had any success.
That's right.
You could see the shack they lived in from my house. One night, my friend Tommy and I, we must have been about 11 at the time, camped out in our front yard. As kids do, we stayed up all night telling ghost stories and the like. It was a bright, moonlit night. In the field across the highway, we could see two movements as the two figures walked up the hill toward their house. We could see movement as the two figures walked up the hill toward their house. Each had a shovel on his shoulder. As our imaginations ran wild, this confirmed to Tommy and me that they must be grave robbers. We took an extra interest in camping that summer so we could watch them more closely. Each Friday and Saturday night, they would repeat the routine, leaving about midnight and returning home at about 4 o'clock in the morning. A couple of years passed, and one day, for no particular reason, I rode my bicycle up the abandoned driveway toward their house. It was about a quarter of a mile long, and no car had driven on it for years.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Although they did odd jobs for my family, we had spoken very little, and we barely knew each other. In fact, they spoke very little to anyone.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
As I approached the house, I could hear conversation from within, and I realized that they were home. I hadn't expected this, and I quickly turned away to ride away.
Johnny!
I stopped!
Come here!
They motioned for me to come to the house, and reluctantly I did. To my surprise, they were as cordial as they could be. The house was clean and neat. It still had no running water or electricity, but for what it was, they had done their best. I suppose all they needed was a friend, and I found their oddness interesting. As strange as it seems, over time, we did become friends. I visited fairly often, but never felt quite comfortable enough to ask about their midnight trips.
Nope, never did.
Now, for some time, a strange thing has been happening in our community. A landowner would find a pit dug on a remote part of his property. This pit would be huge, but there was no possibility of backhoes or bulldozers being brought to the site. No one had any idea of the reason for the digging. This happened in several places. A few years passed, and more holes. It occurred to me that it had to have been the Shovel Brothers.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
By this time, I knew them well enough and thought I was probably the only friend they had. I decided I would ask them on their next visit, and I did. I told them I knew they went someplace every Friday and Saturday night with their shovels. They never answered. It's as if they didn't even hear the question. The rest of the afternoon's visit was very uncomfortable. I decided that I had crossed the line in our friendship and felt it would be better if I didn't come back, or at least not for a while. The next afternoon, as I got off the school bus, I heard Zeke yell.
Johnny, come to the house.
Then they told me.
Johnny, long ago there was a treasure buried somewhere on this section of the land. I won't tell you how we know, but this is what to look for.
If it's a virgin forest, look for the small trees. Large trees, but not as large as virgin timber.
Or a lone cedar grown in an unusual place, like deep in an oak or pine forest. Or a tree limb that's scarred by a rope or a chain.
'Cause that's where they lowered the heavy loot into the hole.
Now, there had long been rumors of buried treasure all over South Mississippi, and the Shovel Brothers were not the only ones who dug for it. Someone even dug up Grandpa's turnip patch one time looking for it. Some say that the Copeland gang buried treasure near our place, but they operated outside of Hattiesburg, which was too far to the east. Some say that it was buried by the Mural gang, who plundered the travelers on the Natchez Trace, but that was probably too far to the west. Some said it was Jean Lafitte sailed up the Pearl River and out of Lake Pontchartrain and took smaller boats laden with treasure up the BOGUE River and buried it someplace on the banks. Then there was a story of old Mr. Gill, who lived up the road. It was said that he buried all of his gold, his money, and his wife's silverware someplace on his property so the Yankees wouldn't get it. I never told their secret, and they continued to dig. I grew up and moved away from BOGUE and seldom returned. After some time, the old house was abandoned again and finally torn down. Last month, I read an obituary in the Brookhaven newspaper. It was the obituary of Zeke. Zeke Dixon, age 76, passed away last Monday. He was preceded in death by his brother, Ralph Dixon. He has no known survivors. Services are incomplete at this time. Then, last week I got a call from an old friend in Brookhaven who happens to be a lawyer. He said that it was very important that I come up there right away. When we met, he told me that Zeke had left a will and stated that I was the only friend that he and his brother ever had.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
The attorney gave me an envelope, which I opened later. Inside was $25,000 and a note scrawled in writing from hands thick with years of calluses. It read,
We found it!